The world woke up in disbelief as shocking reports and dramatic visuals began circulating across global media and social platforms. Explosions, fires, air raid alerts, and an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty gripped Moscow, a city long portrayed as untouchable and heavily fortified. For the first time since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, the Russian capital itself appeared to be under direct threat. What once seemed unthinkable was now being discussed openly. Moscow was no longer beyond reach. For months, the war had largely played out on Ukrainian soil, with cities like Kiev, Kharkiv, Mariupol, and Bakhmut bearing the brunt of destruction. Russia projected power from a position of distance, emphasizing control, strength, and security within its own borders. But this moment changed the psychological landscape of the conflict entirely. Whether symbolic or strategic, the strike on or near Moscow sent a powerful message not only to the Kremlin, but to the Russian public and the international community watching closely. Eyewitnesses reported loud explosions echoing across parts of the city, while emergency services rushed to contain fires and secure sensitive areas. Social media filled rapidly with unverified clips showing smoke rising near infrastructure sites, apartment blocks, and industrial zones. While Russian authorities were quick to downplay the impact, labeling the incident as limited or fully controlled, the images told a different story, one of shock, confusion, and vulnerability. For years, Moscow had been presented as the nerve center of Russian power, protected by one of the most advanced air defense networks in the world. The idea that Ukrainian forces or Ukrainian-linked operations could strike so close to the heart of Russia challenged long-standing narratives. It raised a critical question: if Moscow can be reached, what else is no longer safe? The Kremlin responded swiftly, issuing statements aimed at restoring calm and confidence. Officials insisted that air defenses had intercepted threats and that there was no significant damage to critical infrastructure. Yet, despite these reassurances, the psychological impact could not be undone. Flights were delayed, security was heightened, and residents reported a noticeable increase in police and military presence across the city. Fear, once distant, had arrived at Russia's doorstep. International analysts were quick to point out that even a limited strike on Moscow carries enormous symbolic weight. It represents a shift from purely defensive Ukrainian operations to a broader strategy aimed at deterrence and pressure. The message was clear: Ukraine is not only surviving, but adapting, innovating, and finding ways to challenge Russia beyond the battlefield frontlines. This development comes at a particularly sensitive time for Russian President Vladimir Putin. Already facing growing criticism over prolonged military losses, economic strain, and international isolation, the appearance of vulnerability in the capital adds another layer of pressure. Domestically, questions are emerging about the effectiveness of Russia's security apparatus. If the capital cannot be fully protected, what does that mean for the rest of the country? Inside Russia, state media attempted to control the narrative, minimizing the incident and emphasizing resilience. However, in the age of smartphones and instant information, controlling perception has become increasingly difficult. Russians who once viewed the war as distant are now confronted with its consequences firsthand. The sense of invulnerability that shielded public opinion is eroding. For Ukraine, this moment represents more than a tactical event. It is a psychological counteroffensive. By demonstrating reach and capability, Ukraine signals that continued aggression will not come without cost. The strike challenges the idea that Russia can escalate without consequence, potentially altering calculations within the Kremlin. Global reactions were swift and cautious. Western governments stopped short of openly celebrating the incident, emphasizing the need to avoid further escalation. At the same time, many analysts acknowledged that Ukraine has the right to defend itself and to disrupt the command, logistics, and morale of its adversary. The delicate balance between support and restraint remains at the center of international diplomacy. Military experts are now closely examining how such an operation could have been carried out. Was it a drone strike, sabotage, or a coordinated intelligence operation? The sophistication required to approach Moscow's defenses suggests significant planning and intelligence capabilities. If confirmed, it underscores how modern warfare is increasingly defined by precision, technology, and asymmetric tactics, rather than sheer numbers alone. The implications extend far beyond Moscow. If Ukraine can project power this deep into Russian territory, it may force Russia to divert resources away from the front lines to protect domestic targets. This redistribution could weaken Russian positions in contested regions, altering the momentum of the war. At the same time, the risk of escalation looms large. History shows that attacks on capitals often provoke strong retaliatory responses. The Kremlin may feel compelled to respond forcefully, not only to reassert dominance, but to prevent further erosion of authority. This raises concerns about intensified strikes, broader mobilization, or expanded targets. For ordinary Russians, the incident marks a turning point. The war is no longer something happening somewhere else. It is no longer confined to maps and television screens. It has arrived in the capital, shaking the sense of normalcy that many clung to. Long lines at stores, anxious conversations, and growing uncertainty reflect a population grappling with a new reality. Meanwhile, Ukrainians view the moment through a different lens. After enduring relentless attacks, displacement, and loss, many see the strike as a form of accountability, a sign that the aggressor is not immune to consequences. It fuels morale and reinforces the belief that resistance, though costly, is not futile. The global stage is watching closely. Markets reacted with volatility, diplomats held emergency consultations, and military alliances reassessed risk scenarios. Every move now carries amplified consequences. The war has entered a phase where perception and psychology are as influential as tanks and missiles. President Putin, known for projecting strength and control, now faces one of the most challenging moments of his leadership. The image of stability he has cultivated for decades is under strain. Internally, elites may begin reassessing their positions, while externally, rivals may test boundaries they once feared to cross. Yet uncertainty remains the defining feature of this moment. Details are still emerging, claims and counterclaims continue, and the true scope of the incident may not be fully known for some time. What is certain, however, is that the conflict has crossed a symbolic threshold. Moscow, once considered untouchable, has been shaken. The war has expanded not necessarily in geography but in meaning. It is no longer a distant confrontation, it is a direct challenge to power, perception, and control. As fires are extinguished and investigations continue, one truth stands out: this war is evolving, old assumptions are breaking down. New strategies are emerging, and the question on everyone's mind remains unanswered: if this can happen in Moscow, what comes next? The coming days will reveal whether this moment marks a temporary shock or a lasting shift in the balance of the conflict. For now, the message has been delivered loudly and unmistakably. The center has felt the heat, and the world is watching how it responds.